SpectreVision Radio.
Welcome to the Caribbean Mystics Podcast, where the veil between the worlds is thin. I'm your host, Gabrielle. I explore the true supernatural stories born from our island's unique blend of mysticism, superstition, and lore. These are real accounts from real people, and the encounter you're about to hear might just be from your very own backyard.
My experience with church began at a very young age. The street that I live in is family. So my aunt's next door and my aunt across from us, they both went to this Pentecostal church. And growing up in Trinidad, it takes a community to raise a child. So basically, those were like my parents. So they would drag us to church from the age of like 5, 6 to go to church, to the point where by the time I was 10 years old, I was actually training to become a pastor and was doing sermons on Sundays. So we had sessions where we would take a young person and we would give them 15 minutes of preaching to the congregation. So it's something that I grew up heavily into. So at that time, from about 5, 6 till about 10, 11, until I entered high school, I was heavily involved in church. So church was something very intense. The first time I experienced exorcism was at a crusade that was held outside of the church. So we went to this location in Hardbag in Trinidad. It's a kind of forested area, a small community. And it was actually with respect to one of my uncles who was an alcoholic, a pretty bad alcoholic at that time. And my aunts got him to go to crusade. There was a lot of praying, a lot of singing and stuff like that. And they asked him to come up to the altar. And when he came up to the altar, he started to act out. So he started to speak in a tongue that we couldn't understand. And it sounded like about 4 or 5 different voices coming out of him at that point in time. And me being a young child, I wasn't sure what was going on. So the other church members kind of kept the children backwards, and the pastor came down and laid her hands on him, and we had about 4 or 5 different deacons trying to hold him down because he was like doing this type of dance where his body was kind of contorting, and the pastor asked him his name, and he refused to answer. She grabbed him and she had him here and she kept asking him his name, and he eventually told her. She began speaking direct. She took off the mic and she began to speak directly into him, and one of the words that I could have discerned was "get out, get out, this person is not your vessel." And upon that, he fell to the floor and he began vomiting, like projectile vomiting, a kind of white foamy substance. And he began screaming. And this lasted for about 20 minutes, about 20-30 minutes. And by the time he came back to his senses, he was literally exhausted because there was a lot of energy. He was fighting the deacons, and I'm talking about my uncle is a very slim built, small guy, not very strong, and he was throwing people around and throwing them to the floor and things like that. So that was my first experience as a child growing up in terms of like demonology and things like that. Now the Pentecostal church is something that deals heavily in demonology. and demons, exorcising spirits and stuff like that. They are very intense. They are also kind of cult-like in a sense, looking back, because some of the Pentecostal churches, there are different ranges. My Pentecostal church was a dread one, so you couldn't, so women couldn't wear pants, you couldn't wear jewelry, you had very strict rules within that church. As I said, it was almost like Jim Jones kind of shit. And it was very intense. My parents didn't want me to go to that church, to be quite honest, because my dad is a Presbyterian and he's a pastor there, and they are more laid back. They come for an hour on a Sunday morning. They have a set program. They would sing from the hymnary, and then that would be it. But our church was really intense, like hours. On a Sunday morning, we would go to church for 8 o'clock, and I would be back home probably around 1 o'clock, and then we go back to church at 5. During that time where I was heavily involved in church, I was having a lot of attacks happening to me, even if it's just like sleep paralysis, I don't know, but prayer always stopped it because I was always conscious of what was going on. And this would happen like once or twice a week with me. And it reached the point where it got so normalized that I would just get up and try to pray because I couldn't talk. It was something like here, I could feel it grabbing me here and pushing me back into my bed. It had some times where I was actually lifted off of the bed and went forward and backwards and dropped back down. I realized when I got out of church and started exploring different things, even down to like Freemasonry and things, I learned a lot and I learned to control it better because it had reached a point where I actually was begging God to please stop this because it is getting too intense for me. Fast forward from my adolescence where I grew up heavily in church. It was a stark difference to me when I was a teenager exploring myself. So I'm about 19 years, no, actually around 18 years, sorry. I was in a bar, liming, in Trinidad after lessons. And I got a call from my sister stating to come home that dad is sick. She explained that he had kidney disease and he's gonna have to start dialysis and stuff like that. He and my mom flew to England and they flew to Pakistan to do the transplant. He was there for about a month and a half. When he got there to do the transplant and they checked him out, they told him he needs to do a triple bypass surgery before he does the transplant. So he had 2 major surgeries in his space of a week. But he had to rest for about 2 weeks before he could fly. He flew to Trinidad and we got him and got him to the house. And my aunt wanted to see him. But we told her that she could not. Now in the moment she kind of understood. And I mean, she flying from the US to come and see him, we really didn't. And she's showing up in front of the door like she's there. We can't turn her away, you know. So we let her see my dad from a distance. We sanitized her, take off her shoes, sanitize her clothes and stuff like that. And we got her to the doorway of the guest room. She couldn't go into the room. She stood outside and spoke to my dad from there. My dad said that he was okay and she began crying and stuff like that. And it was an emotional scene happening. And after she left, she went straight to her sister's house and told her sister that she got to see my dad. So that sparked the enrage with my other aunt, because my other aunt called and basically told my mom that we are not good people for not allowing her to come and see my dad. And she just dropped the phone, and that was the Thursday night. And Friday morning, we got the call from my husband, who was at work, to get a call that the house is on fire. And after the autopsy reports and whatever, is that she was murdered and the house set ablaze. So I don't know if it was a robbery or something like that, but what else could go wrong? And what else could go wrong did go wrong for my family. That was the beginning of a 4 to 5 day paranormal experience that I personally would never forget. It started as a normal night. Everyone at that point in time would go to bed in Trinidad like around 8 o'clock. I am a night person, so I was up probably chatting on MSN or some kind of shit like that. And I was on my computer in my room and I went to bed. So I'm asleep. I am awakened by screaming happening. I look at my clock and it is 4 a.m. I rip off the covers and I bolt towards my door. The screaming is coming from my mom's room, which is next to mine. My brother is down the hall. At the same time, he flew out of his room, and my sister waded out of her room sleepily to see my mom standing at the doorway to her bathroom, and her mouth is literally open in shock as to what she is seeing. I walk towards her and I see her standing there, and I kind of move her out of the way to see the entire floor covered in water. The bathroom is flooded out. The shower is on full pressure. The pipe is on full pressure, and water is coming out of the toilet tank as well. I asked her what happened, and she said she thought my dad came into the room because she heard the door open and the lights were on as well for the bathroom, and something opened the bathroom door and went into the bathroom. And she heard the water running faintly, but she was asleep and she thought it was my dad using the bathroom, and she heard the water running for a long time. She called out to him and there was no response. So she got up and looked in the bathroom to see no one there, and all the lights and all the pipes flowing with water. We mopped out the bathroom and everybody went back to sleep like around 5 o'clock. Everybody went around their day. That was Friday. So that happened on Friday. So this is Saturday around 8 o'clock. I decided to just the party starts at 10. I decided to take a small snooze before the party and ended up sleeping the entire night and was awoken around 2 a.m. by my door being violently banged down. So I looked outside to see if it was raining, to see if it was windy or any kind of thing like that. No wind, no rain. Door is violently banging down, and I hear a call on the intercom from my brother. What is happening? He's hearing banging like if somebody's trying to come into the house. And I am now telling him to stay in his room. There's something banging at my door. So this happens for about 30 minutes of violently banging. Um, Eventually, the banging became less in terms of intervals because it came in waves. So it was like bang, 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 and then as the time wound down, it became non-existent. So we have school and stuff on Monday morning. So No liming, no parties, just everyone in the house on that Sunday night. So I actually got to bed early that night, probably around 10 o'clock. I was awoke around again 2 a.m. by my dad screaming downstairs. All of my siblings and I am now in my dad's room, and we see my dad on the floor, and he's kind of clutching his neck here and in shock and breathing very heavily. So we thought it's some sort of medical issue that he's having. My dad took around 2 or 3 minutes to compose himself, and what he told us is that he felt that someone come into the room and pull his covers down and climbed on his body and sat on his chest, took their arms and was grabbing his neck hair and squeezing him, and he couldn't breathe, and he was trying to scream, and nothing wasn't coming out, but he could feel whatever it is around his holding his neck over here. So he told us he began to pray in his mind. Eventually, the he felt like if a ball rolled off of him, and he kind of fell to the floor and began holding his neck because that's where the entity was holding him. And when I checked his neck, there was kind of red marks. So I picked my dad up, I helped him back up on the bed, I gave him some water, and everybody, my siblings, we just looking at each other. I went back to my room and we got back up the next morning. It was Monday. Everybody went to bed around 8 p.m. that night again. So I thought that we were having a normal night until around 2 3 a.m. I got a message on the intercom, and my brother is asking me who is calling his name from outside, and it sounds like one of my family members calling out to him to come and open the back door, which is where his room is. I proceeded to tell him, do not go outside, do not open the door for anyone to come inside. It happened for about half an hour. Then he told me he's not hearing anything again. And again, we went back to sleep. The next day, same routine. Everyone gets up, goes to work or school, and this night my sister calls on the intercom this time, and she's asked, this is around 2 a.m., 3 a.m., around there. She's asking if my brother is outside. My brother jumps on the intercom and he is saying, no, he's in his room. And she is saying she's hearing him calling out to her to come and open the door. He got locked outside. And the first thing I told him, do not answer or acknowledge whatever is calling. Is She was like, what do you mean? What is happening? Because my sister is pretty scared of what is going on. I was like, we'll talk about this in the morning. So again, it proceeds for about half an hour. It eventually died down to the point where she told us she's not hearing anything again. So I was like, okay, time to go and sleep. So we went back to sleep, and the next morning I called my pastor and told her what was happening. We come together as a family that day when I make the call, and I call my mother and I call my sister and my brother. And I told them, I was like, hey, something is going on in this house since Auntie Katie died. and we are not talking about it, and everybody is having experiences. And my sister chimes in and she says, "Yes, I'm very scared about what is happening. The house feels like there's a heavy presence on the house now." And I told them that I contacted the pastor to come. So she came on the Wednesday afternoon. She came in and she began to say her prayers, and we left her to do what she needed to do. She came with some people from the church, so we prepared like a small little meal and things like that for them, and they went about the different parts of the house and they prayed for the house, and we just waited there until she came back, and she told us there's something demonic happening here. She said that there's a spirit that is trying to come into the home under the guise of my aunt, and it is trying to get in, and whatever she did, she prayed and she got it out of the house. So I was like, "You sure everything is okay now?" She said she doesn't think that we would have a problem any longer, but if something does happen, let her know. Whatever she did, she held our hands and she did one final prayer and asked to bless the food and stuff like that, and we had a small dinner together, and then they left around 7 o'clock. And we proceeded to have no encounters after the cleanse of the place.
Thank you for listening to the Caribbean Mystics podcast. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone. And to make sure that you never miss a tale, follow or subscribe wherever you listen. We are always seeking true stories. If you or someone you know has had a supernatural encounter rooted in the Caribbean, I want to hear it. Send your story to caribbeanmysticspodcast@gmail.com. That's caribbeanmysticspodcast@gmail.com. For links and resources from today's episode, check the show notes. The Caribbean Mystics Podcast, Season 5, is written, produced, and hosted by me, Gabrielle Carrard. Until next time, stay curious and maybe leave a light on.